We usually think of fairy tales as simple stories about luck, but if you look at the way they are built, they function more like a sequence of actions and consequences. Cinderella begins her life in a position of total security. She is the daughter of a wealthy man, living in a house where her status is guaranteed by birth. That security is tied to her parents. When her mother dies and her father leaves on a months-long business trip from which he never returns, the protection of the family name disappears with them. This leaves a hole in the house that her stepmother, Vivian, is quick to fill. She brings in her own daughters, Isabella and Elizabeth, and begins treating the household assets as her own. Because Cinderella has no one left to advocate for her, the family dynamic shifts. The rightful heir is pushed into the kitchen, stripped of her clothes and her title, and turned into a servant in the house she used to own. The step family spends their time looking for a shortcut back to the top. They pore over books of wealthy bachelors, convinced that their only job is to marry someone with a title. While they wait to be rescued by a prince, Cinderella is forced into the dirt. She spends her days growing pumpkins, hauling them to town and selling them to keep the household running. Even under this pressure, she doesn't stop working. She makes a choice to meet her circumstances with diligence instead of bitterness. This creates two different trajectories. The sisters are focused on what they are owed, while Cinderella is focused on what she can build with her own hands. At the palace, the king is losing patience. He tells the prince it's time to stop overthinking and pick a bride from the registry of noble families. But the prince isn't interested in a marriage arranged through a book. He wants to know who people actually are, so he puts on a disguise and walks into the city like a commoner. He ends up in the public market, where he finds a girl selling pumpkins. It's Cinderella. She doesn't realize she's talking to royalty, so she speaks to him as an equal. She explains how she handles every part of the harvest herself. He sees someone who is clever and capable, qualities he hasn't found in the palace. Back at the manor, the sisters are still looking at their catalogs, completely unaware that the man they're looking for is currently standing in the mud, talking to the person they treat like a servant. This moment shows the difference between the image of status and the reality of a person's character. When the king announces a ball for all the women in the kingdom, the step family sees their chance. To keep Cinderella out of the way, they bury her under a pile of chores, physically preventing her from leaving. This is where the story introduces magic. The spirit of Cinderella's mother intervenes, providing the tools she needs to bypass the family's locks and get to the palace. But there is a catch. The magic has a time limit. When the clock hits midnight, the fantasy ends. This forces Cinderella to eventually face her real life, no matter how much she enjoys the ball. She gets her dance with the prince, but as the clock strikes 12, she has to run. She disappears into the night before the magic fades. In her hurry, she leaves behind a single glass slipper. It's no longer just a piece of clothing. It's physical evidence that she was actually there. The prince uses that slipper to find the girl from the ball. He takes it to every house in the kingdom, using it as a foolproof test. When he reaches the manor, the sisters try everything to make the shoe fit, but they can't change the size of their feet. Then Cinderella tries it on, and it fits perfectly. Tracking their social status over time reveals two lines moving in opposite directions. Cinderella's line climbs to the palace, cementing a permanent change. The red line plummets. Stripped of stolen wealth, the step family ends up exactly where Cinderella started, in the street, selling pumpkins. They are left in the market, now being chased by the same palace officials they once tried to impress. The story shows that while shortcuts might work for a while, the outcome is eventually determined by what a person actually does. Cinderella's resilience moved her forward, while the step family's greed brought them back to the dirt.